Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again. Today I can see that you are very happy because in the previous lecture you learned about a new thing, that was the functioning and operational of a statistical software, that is the eViews. So I assume and I believe that you are a responsible and serious students, and you will continue working over this, because only 1, 2 or 3 lecture on the eViews, it is not enough sufficient, because there is a lot of functioning of the eViews that needs to be a full semester course if someone wants to teach it to the students comprehensively. But at the same time, it cannot be assumed that the students are unable to learn this. As you have started, as you have become beginner of this, like many other things, as you will start working on this software, you will automatically learn more and more things, and there is help also. You can get any of the help from the eViews. So without giving any summary against you can say today we will be going something against the usuality, because I am not presenting the summary because the previous work was totally practical. I would like to give you that what we are going to cover today. We will be talking about the R-square very quickly, because I remember in the lecture before the eViews I talked about a bit about the R-square. The more important is the adjusted R-square, and we will see that what is the difference between these two R-square. And after this, the next discussion will be game of maximizing adjusted R-square. That the people mean researcher like you and me, they are in the habit of maximizing adjusted R-square, because it is the first and the face impression of the analysis. After this, multiple regression model, as we are more interested in the multiple regression model, because bivariate model are only a rare chance, because dependent variable is influenced by many of the independent variable rather than only one independent variable. And if time permits, we will be talking about the problem of estimation, because when we will be making the estimation, this technique will be facing number of problems, and we will see that how to resolve these problems, how to detect these problems, and what are the consequences of these problems. So starting formally, I would like to start from the R-square very quickly, because I have talked about enough about the R-square. In two variable case, if you remember, this was the sign and we called that this is the R-square. It simply measures that how much variation in the dependent variable is explained by the independent variable. So here now we have only two variables, and I am supposing that we are talking about extension of the two variable regression model, and that is we call the three variable regression model. Although this analysis can be extended to a number of independent variable, but in the beginning, after two variable, I am extending it to three variable regression model. The thing, it is just to keep the things simple, and as you will see that as it expands to two variable to three, then there is some problems and there are some assumptions. You can exactly adapt it to the multivariate and more than three variable regression model. The quantity that gives, that is the R-square here. If you see here, that this quantity that tells us now that the variation in the dependent variable on the basis of two independent variable, the x2 and x3. Now this is called the R-square, and it is called again this is called the capital R-square, and it is the same thing, the measure of goodness of fit, or you can say that this is the coefficient of determination. Conceptually, it is very, very akin to mean, it is similar to the small R-square that we used in the in the process of bivariate regression model. However, it is very akin and it is very similar to that. I will be very quickly going these its properties. The first property is the same, that its range is between 0 and 1, and if it is 1, the regression line explains 100% of the variation in y. As you are aware of this, no need to explain this. If it is 0, it means your model is totally ineffective and your model is explaining variation in y only up to 0%, which means it has nothing to do with the y. Typically, R square lies between this range, that is the 0 and 1 range. And as you can see, the fit becomes more and more better as this value converges towards 1. And the reliability, or you can say the its size of the R square decreases as you go towards the 0, and it is not good that as you converge towards the 0. So now our talking starts in a new phenomena, that what is the R square and the adjusted R square. It is a very simple property of the regression model that as you add a new independent variable, the R square increases. It is you can say the phenomena that with the increase of a new independent variable, R square automatically increase, or you can say that it never decreases. Either it remains same or it goes it increases. Many of the time, many time it keeps on increasing. So what this means, that what this gives us the purpose, that when we have to compare two R square, we have to have some knowledge that how many independent variables are there. Because if a person use less independent variable and the other use more independent variable, if everything is similar, it is quite possible that the person who is using a large number of more number of independent variable, he has higher R square. So in comparing the R square, we should be well aware of the number of independent variable in the regression model. So how we will do this? This can be readily, we can do it if we are looking on the adjusted R square rather than the R square. What is the adjusted R square? Adjusted R square adjusts the cost and benefit. For example, as you increase a new variable into the model, that is the independent variable, as I said, the R square will increase. So definitely as you have included one more independent variable, the degree of freedom has decreased. So now there is a cost and benefit analysis. On the degree of freedom side, there is cost, and on the R square side, there is the benefit. So adjusted R square potentially make a cost benefit analysis, and ultimately it presents the value of and we call that value that this is the adjusted R square. So we say that adjusted R square may be negative. This is interesting. R square, simple R square will never be negative. It is necessarily a non-negative quantity. And R square, that is now the adjusted R square, how we mention it, it is adjusted R square in this way. So this adjusted R square may be 0, and when its value is 0, it may be negative, and when its value is negative, we assume its value is equal to 0. The game of maximizing R square. This is a very interesting game, and I think many of the researchers are biased towards maximizing the adjusted R square, because this is the first impression of your study, of your analysis, and you know the first impression is the last impression. So if you convey the impression in a very better and you can say a concrete way, then you can say the results are have an impressing effect on the viewer or the reader. So what this is, sometimes researchers play this game. that in choosing the model, that gives the higher R square. For example, you have some alternate A model and B model. So which model you will be choosing? For example, this is the A model and this is the B model. And this is the C model. If it has the adjusted R square is equal to 0.80, this had adjusted R square equal to 0.7, and this has adjusted R square equal to 0.95. So if these are the three models, you estimated your analysis, you came up with these 3 times, and you came up with these 3 values of the adjusted R square. So what is the maximizing game of maximizing? You are immediately rushing towards the using C model because it has a higher R square value. Now our purpose is to see that is it a very good criteria and is it always dependent criteria, or we should go for something else, or we should just concentrate on the value of the higher adjusted R square. But this is very, very dangerous, because just maximizing the R square, it could be very dangerous, because in regression analysis our objective is not to obtain a higher R square. Although higher R square is a good thing, but our ultimate objective is not to obtain the higher R square, but rather than we want dependable estimates of the true population regression from which we can draw statistical inference. I think you know what is the objective of your research. Objective of the research is to find the dependable and reliable estimates from which we can make inference about the population. And further going in empirical analysis, now there is the possibility. In empirical analysis, it is the possible that the adjusted R square is higher, but the results are not reliable. And at the same time, it is quite possible that the adjusted R square is lower, but the results are highly, you can say, the dependable. I would like to give you a very interesting example. For example, there was a love marriage, and in the beginning it was higher R square. There was matching, and people were thinking that it is very high R square. Now people mean the couple. So there was love between the persons, and the adjusted R square was very higher. But unfortunately, after a year or 2 years, the expectations did not meet, and there was unfortunately divorce. So look at this model. The R square was higher, but the results, or you can say the inference, were not reliable. Now go to other extreme, that the marriage was arranged marriage by the parents. Now there will be, and in the beginning it was as it was arranged marriage, the R square was low. But as the life keeps on, people, wife and husband keep on finding, but they are now under the, you can say, the umbrella of the family, and there is some positive interference from the family, and this never comes the situation of divorce. So in this situation, in the beginning, the R square was very high, but you can say the results were not dependable. But on the other side, in the arranged marriage, the R square is very low, but the results are very, you can say, the dependable. So what is the message from it? Do not rush about the higher R square. It is called the game of maximizing higher R square. So therefore, the researcher should be more concerned about the logical or theoretical. This is the logical or theoretical relevance. The more concentration on should be whether your results are logical. For example, if you see as the price increases, the demand increases. Whatever the value of R square, it is even 99.9%, the results are ridiculous. because as the price increases, there is no evidence that the quantity demand increases in the normal situation. There is a negative relationship, but if this is the situation, R square cannot justify that this is the true. In the process of obtaining R square, on the other hand, if R square is low, it does not mean the model is necessarily bad. As I gave the example of the arranged marriage, in arranged marriage the R square is low, but it doesn't mean that necessarily the model is bad. Now the problem of regression analysis. So as we will be doing regression analysis, we will be facing many of the problems. So we will be talking about one by one, and we will see that how those problems occur, how we can detect then whether that there is a problem or not, and if we detect, then what is the remedial measure, and if we do not address those, you can say that those problems, then what are the consequences, empirical and theoretical consequences of this. So first off, we will be talking about the multicollinearity. If you remember, the classical linear regression model assume that there is no multicollinearity, and I think it was the last assumption of the classical linear regression model. It was last because at that time we did not talk about the multivariate regression model. We just confined ourselves to the two-variate regression model. But what is this? It says that if model is of this kind, beta 1 plus beta 2 x2 plus beta 3 x3 plus ui. What this means that there should be no correlation between this. No means no high correlation between x2 and x3. And what we will be doing this, so we will starting from the very first problem, that is the multicollinearity. We will see that this is present in almost all kind of data, and we will have to address it, and if we do not address it, then what are the repercussions of this situation. First of all, we will be looking that what is the nature of multicollinearity, that what the multicollinearity is. I just gave it only a small and you can say the brief sketch in this model. I will be showing it by Ballantine view also. Is multicollinearity real a problem? We will see that whether the multicollinearity in reality is a problem. If it is a problem, then we will see, and if it is no problem, then we will see that why the people are making such hue and cry about the multicollinearity. Then we will see what are its practical consequences. That if multicollinearity is present in your data and you run the regression, what are its practical consequences? And then we will see how does one detect it. Is there any dream that we immediately come to know that there is multicollinearity in the data, or there are some measures or techniques that help us to finding this, that whether there is multicollinearity or not. What remedial measures at the end we will see can we take to alleviate the problem of multicollinearity. So we will be talking about in a systematic way. So first starting that what is the nature of the multicollinearity. Now MC means the multicollinearity. It is just a symbol to save the time. It means the existence of a perfect or exact linear relationship among some or all explanatory variables. Here we are not talking about the dependent variable. We are talking about totally about the independent variable, and what we are looking that is there any perfect or exact linear relationship between any of the two regressor or the independent variable or many of the independent variable. So if you look at this example, if you see that this is the x2. Now look at this, our model is, for example, this yi is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2 x2 plus beta 3 x3, and this is, if you see here, there, these are the values up to here, and what is the x3? If you see, we have just multiplied each value of x2 with 5. If we multiply it by 10, it becomes 50, and then 75, and this one. So now if I want to write the relationship, I can say that x3 is simply equal to 5x2. If we multiply each value of the x2 by 5, then the values of the x3 comes. And at the same time, if I take something randomly here, you cannot join it with this one, because you say I have added or subtracted something randomly into the, and that I call that this is the x star. Now what is this? If we take the correlation between x2 and x3, there will be a perfect relationship, and there will be very, very high correlation. And even if we take the correlation between, if I take the correlation or x2 and x3, it will be very high, because now there is exact relationship, and this is the exact relationship, and this is the exact linear relationship. And if I take the correlation between x2 and x3 star, that is this one, the correlation is high, but there is not the exact relationship. So what is the multicollinearity in nature that we are going to explain? That multicollinearity says that there should be no exact relationship between the variable. If the variable that are the independent variable, if they are linked with exact and linear relationship, we will call that there is multicollinearity. If I would like to show you this on the diagram, if you see, this is the y variable to whom we are going to explain. This is y. And if you see, this is the, I assume that there are two variables. This is the independent variable. This is the x1, and this is the x2. So you can see that there is no multicollinearity, because x2 and x3s have no common area with each other. Now I am replacing it. This case is no multicollinearity. MC again mean no multicollinearity. Now look at this. This is again the same y. This is now a x1 variable, and this is now the x2 variable. If you see that this area within the range of y, this is the common area between x2 and x3. So I will say that here is low multicollinearity. This is showing the low multicollinearity. x2 and x3 has some common area within the limits of y. If you see here, this dotted line, this is the multicollinearity. Further, I am going to make higher multicollinearity. So high multicollinearity, so this is again y, and I can see that you immediately can do this. This is x1, and this is now the x2. If you see that this is now, this is the common area, and this is now high multicollinearity. If you see, this is high multicollinearity. And if you keep on increasing the overlapping of the independent variables, then you will come to know the multicollinearity is increasing over time, and it can even go to 100% in the case of, as there was exact and linear relationship. If x2 and x3 are generated in such a way that there exists a exact linear relationship, then the multicollinearity is, you can say, very high. Logic behind assuming no multicollinearity in the classical linear regression model. If you remember, this was the assumption that there is no multicollinearity between the independent variable. So here we are interested that what is the logic behind assuming this kind of this. The logic is that If the multicollinearity is perfect, as our previous case, this is the multicollinearity is the perfect because x2 and x3, this is the exact linear relationship. So if the multicollinearity is the exact, the regression coefficients, I know you know the regression coefficients of the x variable, that are, you can say, the beta 1 hat, beta 2 hat, x coefficient, beta 3 hat, and beta 4. If there are many variables, these become indeterminate. This is interesting. If you run the regression now, it is up to you, and I think if you take two series in such a way that they are exactly linearly linked with each other, you will see that your slope parameters that will become indeterminate. You will be unable to determine their value, and their standard errors will become infinite. It means they have become extraordinarily large. So one of the reason of this was that why we assume this, that there should be no high multicollinearity or exact linear relationship between the variable, because if this is the situation, you can just empirically now test. You have the views and you know how to run this. Take two series x and the other x1 and x2 and link them, that x1 and x2 as we linked here. Take even you can take the same values. If you run into the eViews, the regression, you will see that you will not be finding the values of the parameters, and their standard errors becomes infinite. This was the case of exact multicollinearity, 100% multicollinearity. But the other is, if multicollinearity is less than perfect, not exactly 100%, but it is less than perfect, mean 0.80%, you can say 90%, 95%, 99%. If it is less than 1, although you will be able to determine the parameters, you will estimate, but one of the situation is that there will be large standard errors. And you know the standard error is a measure of precision of the parameters, that how this is close towards the true parameter. So if you are doing this, what will happen, that if there is just less than the 100% multicollinearity, and you will call it that there is, although there is not exact or 100% multicollinearity, it is very high collinearity, you will be able to estimate your regression coefficients, but one drawback will remain with you, that is you will be finding the large, otherwise extraordinarily large standard errors, and these will be very high in relation to the coefficients themselves. The value of the coefficients will be very small, as these are the slope coefficients, but the standard error reported below in the bracket, they'll be very high. Which means, what is the implication of this? Why we are worried about that the standard error is high? We are worried about the standard error because as the standard error becomes larger, then what we say, that our precision becomes questionable. We can't measure the, you can say, this is your estimates with precision. Look, I would like to just clarify these two things. The first, very quickly I am doing this. In the first case, there is 100% multicollinearity, and in this case, you will not be able to determine the estimates, and their standard errors will be going towards infinity. And the other case, if it is the multicollinearity is less than 100, whatsoever from, you can say, 0.80 to 0.99, then what will be, you will estimate these beta 1 and 2 hat and beta 3 hat, but at the same time there will be larger standard error, and as the standard error becomes larger, our precision of the parameter becomes questionable. Sources of multicollinearity, that from where multicollinearity enters into our data. Now, like a doctor, we are like a MBBS doctor, we are going in a way that first of all we will ask from the patient that what he ate in the morning or even the evening. Then we will see why is there a link between this. Then we diagnose. Then we will give medicine, and we will see whether there is recovery or not. So the first source of data, the multicollinearity, where it comes from the data collection method. The data collection method you apply, for example, sampling over a limited range of the values taken by the regressor. If you collect the data in such a way that the variation in the independent variable is limited between two limits, very small limits, and they cannot go beyond those limits. For example, if your regressor is just changing between 2 to 4, either its values between 2 to 4, so it is limited range. And as there is limited range for the regressor, there are the chances of high multicollinearity, because now they can't go some of the, you can say, the beyond limits, and they are changing in a very, very narrow area, so there are chances. If this is the situation, the first situation is that the data collection methodology is responsible for bringing the multicollinearity into the data. The second is very interesting, that is that the constraint on the model or in the population being sampled. Naturally, there are some of the, you can say, the constraint, and if you take these regressor, then there is some kind of the multicollinearity. For example, if you see, I take the example of that we run that the electricity consumption. Now, rather than y, I write the electricity consumption. It is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2, and I say this is the income beta 2i plus beta 3 house size, the size h as house size, the size of the house. So what is this? If you look interestingly and keenly here, now there is a physical constraint between the income and the household size. The families whose income is higher, most of the time they have larger houses as compared to the families whose income is low. So now there is already a physical constraint in the population, and as you are going to draw the sample from the population, so you can't, you can say, so you have to take from the same population. So this is the other reason for the multicollinearity. The first is the data collection methodology. Your independent variable can't vary in a big range. And the other is that sometimes there is some natural constraint, and you can see that if we want to see that the electricity consumption is determined by two things, the income of the people and the household size, house size, then what will we see that on the independent side the two variables are linked, house size, the size of the house, and the income. And most of the time there is evidence that the people who have higher income, they have larger, or you can say the bigger houses. The third is, this was the second reason, the third is the model specification. If you set your model in such a way, and particularly you added a polynomial terms to a regression model, especially when the range of x variable is small. Now you have understood from the first thing that what I mean by the range of the independent variable. So what this is, that if the range is already very, you can say, limited, and you introduce a polynomial form of the variable into the model, this can increase the multicollinearity. So what is the third? That model specification. So be careful. It is quite possible that the polynomial term is explaining your the variation in your dependent variable, but at the same time, if the range of your independent variable is limited and you introduce the polynomial term, it can bring multicollinearity in the data. The fourth source that the multicollinearity can come into on the side, that is an overdetermined model. Overdetermined model is This happens when the model has more explanatory variables than the number of observation. That it happens particularly in the cases of, you can say, the medicine studies. For example, if a patient comes, now the observation of the patients are small, but many factors can affect their disease. So in these cases, the independent variable becomes more, the number of variables becomes, the number of parameter to be estimated becomes greater than the number of observation. So if you remember, there was also one of the assumption of the classical linear regression model that the number of observation should be greater than the number of parameters, and this was the logic behind this. The fifth reason for the multicollinearity is a regressor that you have included into the model share a common trend. Many of the variables have the similar trend over time. For example, if I say that the taxes in Pakistan are increasing as our GDP is increasing, no need to worry about that. Many people in Pakistan are hiding their taxes and they are not paying. It is ground reality. But at the same time, if you see the data, as our GDP is increasing, the tax revenue as in absolute term, they are increasing. I am not using that they are increasing as a share of GDP. In absolute term, they are increasing. Similarly, if you look at this, the population is also increasing over time. So these three variables are going in the same direction. It means these three variables have a similar trend. So when these variables have a similar trend, there are the chances of multicollinearity. So this was the fifth reason that why multicollinearity comes into the data. Theoretical consequences of this, that what happens if there is multicollinearity into the data. If we know that if we maintain the assumption of the classical linear regression model, our OLS estimators of the regressions are below. I think you are well aware of this below. They are the best linear unbiased estimator. Best being they have the minimum variance, linear, they are linearly related with the Y. U is unbiased, unbiased is if we take the average of n betas, they become, their average becomes to the true beta, that is the expected value of any of the beta is equal to true beta. If now what is the theoretical consequences that what happens to the betas, whether they remain below or they become some of the property of the below is left. So what we say, if multicollinearity is high, as in the case of near multicollinearity, we can say this is a near multicollinearity and very high multicollinearity are the similar things. So OLS estimates still retain the property of below. This is very, very interesting and contradictory that nothing is happening to our OLS estimates. We are worried about our OLS estimates. Now OLS estimates are the betas. So then if there is no problem with the OLS, then why we are worried about the multicollinearity? Then why multicollinearity is called a problem? Because under the assumption of the classical linear regression model, the betas are taking the same properties, they are maintaining their properties. Then so no statistical answer to this question. Statistical is unable to provide a concrete answer that at one side, if there is no problem when that the betas are below. So what is the result of this discussion? That in large sample, multicollinearity is not a serious problem. In small sample it could be a serious problem, but in the large sample it is not a very serious problem. So what are the theoretical consequences of multicollinearity? Very interesting, that our assumption is that under the classical linear regression model, OLS estimators are below. And what we say that in the high multicollinearity, OLS estimator are still below. Then immediate question comes that what is the problem with the then estimation? The statistical is unable to give any of the answer. So we conclude the result that in a large sample, multicollinearity is not a big issue, but if your sample size is small, then it could be a big issue. And you remember I repeatedly said that your sample should be larger. As your sample increases, many of the problems you will see in the future discussion, that many of the problems are automatically solved. Those were the theoretical consequences. In other words, we can say theoretical there is not a big issue because your OLS estimators are still you can say that they are still below. But now in reality, when you will be doing your empirical research, you will be conducting research and taking data and you will be applying this. What could be the consequences of this? And we call them that these are the practical consequences of multicollinearity. So what is this? Although below, we assume, we are agree, we satisfied, we trust that OLS are still below in the presence of multicollinearity, but one problem is that they have large variances and covariances that make the precise estimation difficult. Now the problem starts in our empirical discussion. What is the problem here is that although the property of below is maintained, but now the variances of the betas or you can say the coefficients becomes larger and covariance also become larger. And you know, as the variance or the standard variance, if we take the positive square root of variance, it becomes the standard error. So if the variance is high, the precision of the parameter is not as it should be. Now what happens if it is high? The confidence intervals tend to much wider, leading to the acceptance of the zero null hypothesis. I would like to explain. If you remember, we used to make the interval. For example, I am going to make the interval about the beta 2 hat. At this side it was beta 2 hat minus this one, and this was the lower bound, and this was the beta 2 hat plus, you can say, this is the sigma. This is the standard error, or you can say this is the standard deviation. This sign is for standard deviation, and this is also. Now look at this. If these value is large and this value is large, definitely if one is large, we are using the same parameter here, the confidence interval becomes larger. And as it becomes larger, for example, before, in such case, if I suppose that when sigma, that is the standard error, is small, we have such kind of interval, and this is the acceptance region. And for which of the acceptance region? For H0, and these areas are called the rejection region. So what will happen if your standard error becomes higher? Now look at this. This interval will become wider. Now if you see, the acceptance region has increased. So what are its consequences? That now there are more chances that you are unable to reject the null hypothesis, and very simple and you can say vulgar way I can say that you accept the null hypothesis. And what is our null hypothesis? That our betas is equal to 0. That means they have no significance, or they are not different from 0. So it means we are making a big you can say error when we find these standard error are high. So this was the second thing, that the practically, theoretically no problem. Practically, the first problem is that the variances and the covariances becomes higher, precision becomes questionable. The second is that your confidence interval that we make on the basis of the standard error becomes wider. If I want to show under the normal curve, the situation becomes in this way. For example, if the sigma is lower, this is, for example, this is the acceptance region under the t distribution. If I say that it becomes very higher, so what will happen? Now the normal curve is the same, but you can see that this is the range has increased. So this is the 95% acceptance region. So if this is the situation, we are unable to reject our null hypothesis. And you know our null hypothesis that beta is equal to 0 as it is not statistically significant 0. The third is the t ratio of 1 or more coefficient tends to be statistical insignificant. Now if you want to test it by t statistics, if you remember the formula of the t statistics, I can think you remember it was equal to beta 2 hat minus true beta over standard error of beta 2 hat. Look at this. If the standard errors of beta 2 have become, you can see here, if the standard errors of the beta 2 becomes higher, as this will become higher, it has negative relation with the t. So as the denominator will become higher, the overall term will reduce and we will be getting the t value that will be small. And when we reject the null hypothesis, we say when our t calculated C means is greater than t tabulated. Now our t calculated is getting smaller and smaller. As the variances are increasing, our t that we will calculate from all this, it is becoming smaller and smaller. So when it is coming smaller and smaller, so there are chances that we are now unable to reject our null hypothesis using the t statistics. This was the theory consequence of practical consequence. The fourth is, although t ratio of 1 or more coefficient is statistically significant, R square, the overall measure of goodness, can be very high. The other problem of this is that although as we said that as the variance will increase, the t ratios will become smaller and becomes insignificant. But at the same time, that if there are t insignificants, there is higher R square. So now there is contradiction between the t and the R square. T statistics are saying that our coefficients are insignificant. On the other hand side, R square is saying that our model is a good fit. So now there is a trade-off between this. You can say the contradiction between this. So this is the also problem, because we will immediately go towards the R square. And at the same time, when we are saying, we are showing that the R square is very high, and the other side, when we look at the individual coefficients, we come to know that they are insignificant, then how we can say that there is a higher R square? So this is the fourth problem. Then you will be doing your analysis. You may find that R square is very high. You immediately jump in the air that your model is good fit, but your happiness vanishes within a second when you look at the t statistics, because t statistics, due to the presence of multicollinearity, due to the higher variance, due to the higher standard deviation or the standard error, these t ratios becomes insignificant, and there is the higher probability that you are unable to reject the null hypothesis. The fifth one is that the OL estimator and their standard errors can be sensitive to small changes in the data. Now, if this is the case, that the multicollinearity is present in the data, now OL estimates and their standard error becomes highly sensitive. What this means, if we we bring small changes into the data, there will be high changes, extraordinary changes into the, you can say, the OL estimate, now beta 1, beta 2, and their standard errors. Detection of multicollinearity. Now we have just asked about from the patient that what he had, from where he came, and whatsoever his, you can say, the historical, we did the historical study so that we could understand that what the problem was and what was the reason. We saw that what were you can say that what were the sources of multicollinearity, then we saw its practical implication as well as we saw its theoretical problems. Detection of multicollinearity. It is not although it is a matter of intuition that you can guess from the variables, or if there is a plot of variable graph, that you can guess that there is a problem of multicollinearity, but at the same time there are no, you can say, immediate detection method. So the first thing we should remember that in detection of the multicollinearity, we are not talking about the presence or absence of the multicollinearity. Multicollinearity is always there in the data, but sometime it is higher and sometime it is lower. So we are not worried about that whether it is present in the data or not, because it is there. We are worried about its degree. We are worried about its degree, and what this means, that whether it is high or low. If it's high, either it is high, either it is low. It is a feature of the sample. Keep in mind that the multicollinearity is a problem of the sample. It is not the problem of the population, because it refers to the condition of the explanatory variables that are assumed to be non-stochastic. Now you should remember your previous knowledge that we said that we are interested in predicting the average value of the dependent variable on the basis of fixed values of the independent variable. When we fixed them in our sampling, we said that they have become non-stochastic. So this is, as we are assuming this in the sample, so the multicollinearity is a problem of sample, it is not a problem of the population. Now how to detect, it was just the, you can say, the background of this, that what we mean that we are going to detect. We are not going to detect that whether it is present or not, because its present is ensured that by any kind, but we are worried about its, you can say, the degree, whether it is high or low. No unique method is of detecting it or measuring its strength. We have no hard and fast rule, and we can't say that this is the panacea and this is the only method that we can do this and we can detect this. But there are some rule of thumbs. These are some guidelines that will take you on the other side of the tunnel. Only if you will rely on only one method, it is not possible. There is no uniqueness in the methods that can detect there is multicollinearity. The first is the high R square but few significant T statistics. The first thing, the first rule of thumb is that if you see your output, if it is the output of eViews or SAS or SPSS, you see that your R square is very high, but at the same time your T statistics are not significant, that you should guess that there may be the problem of multicollinearity. I would like to write it. For example, if I run this regression, I say that this is my estimated output, that is 0.8 plus 0. This is hypothetical now things, x1, x2 plus 0.7, x2 plus 0.3, x, this is x3, x4. So what is this? This is now your beta 1 hat, this is 0.9, beta 2 hat, and this is beta 3 hat, and this is beta 4 hat. If you can see, I always write x2 because I want to match beta 2 x2. It is very easy to say beta 2 x2, beta 3 x3, and beta 4 x4. Now I report that here the t statistics is 1.50, here t statistic is 2.79, here t statistics is 0.676, and here the t statistics is 1.07. And I say the R square is written is equal to 0.80. Now immediately if I will I will see this output, I will immediately say that there is a problem of multicollinearity. Why there is a problem of multicollinearity? Look at this. This is a very encouraging thing, that the R square is very high. But on the other side, there are some, you can say, the bottlenecks, or there are some problems. What are these? Only this t has significant. There is a rule of thumb that if t is more than, under certain assumption, under certain conditions, what are the simple conditions? That if their number of observation is greater than 20 and we test the take the alpha equal to 5%, then as the t increases, this is now t calculated, not the t tabulated. So as the t increases, becomes greater than 2 or equal to 2 in absolute term, we say that we reject the null hypothesis, and we indirectly say that the t is significant, t statistics are significant. So look at this, except from beta 2 hat, all other t statistics are insignificant. So now it is bringing contradiction. At one side I am saying that the model is good fit, on the other side I am saying that only one thing is significant and other three parameters, other estimates are insignificant. So I immediately can guess that such kind of situation happens in the situation when there is higher multicollinearity. So first method to detect the multicollinearity is that you should look at the R square and the t ratios. The second method of detecting the multicollinearity is high pairwise correlation among regressors. You can see this high pairwise correlation among the regressor by two methods. The one is you can plot these two regressors. The other is that you can estimate the coefficient of correlation between these two variables. For example, if I want to see, look at here, I want to see that the same model is there. I want to see that whether there is correlation between x3 and x2 and x3 are multicollinear. So what we will see, I would like to see the coefficient of correlation between x2 and x3. It is also written as this is the R223. R23 means the correlation coefficient between the second regressor and the third regressor. So if this correlation coefficient is equal to, for example, 0.80, if it is more than 80, it means there is high multicollinearity. So one of the method is to see the pairwise correlation. The other way is, for example, I would draw the same thing here. If I take x2 here and I take the x3 here. So if the plot shows such kind of things, I can guess that x2 and x3 are, now you can say they are correlated with each other. So this was the second method that we explained, that there is higher pairwise correlation. So the third method is, I will just like to give a little glimpse of this, and we will keep this pending up to the next discussion. So because it is something special, we will just talk about this, and we will after this we will try to wind up the lecture, and I would like to give you the summary. The third method is how to find the multicollinearity detect. Now you are doctor, you are doing the different blood tests. One test is coming, the other is coming, the other is coming, and every test is showing setting a stage for you, and you can guess from whether there is multicollinearity and or not. Two, you can say, blood test we have taken, that if there is higher R square and the majority of T statistics is insignificant, this is one thing, and if you conduct the pairwise correlation, it is also one method to detect multicollinearity. The other is the auxiliary regressions. This is not the original regression that we will, for example, if we run the regression, this is y on beta 1 plus beta 2 x2 plus beta 3 x3 plus beta 4 x4. This is not the auxiliary regression, but auxiliary regression is this, that if we want to see that whether there is a correlation between x2, high multicollinearity between x2, x3 and x4, what we will be doing, we will be taking one of the regressor. Now forget about the y, the dependent variable. Now what we will be doing, I will be taking one regressor, x2, and I will regress this on all the other independent variable that are x3. So my first auxiliary regression will come x2 is equal to beta 1 plus beta 2 x3 plus beta 4 x4. So what I am doing this, rather than the first original equation, I am doing the auxiliary. Auxiliary, there will be many auxiliary regression depending upon the number of independent variable. So in the same way, if when I will run the auxiliary regression x3, then I will be, you can say, doing this. Now x3 will come and the all other independent variable, now beta 2 x2 will come here, and that is beta 4 x4. And when there will be x4, beta 2 and beta 3 will become the independent variable. So when I will calculate this, every time I will have some R square, measure of goodness of fit. So now on the basis of this R square, we will be, this is the F test. This is the F value, that is the calculated F. This is like the T test. The difference, I am not going to in detail of the F test. The difference between F test and the T test is that under the T test, we can test the significance of individual parameter. We can't simultaneously test that two parameters are equal to 0, or we can't make null hypothesis about the two estimates at the same time under the T statistics. But on the other side, F test has the advantage over the T statistics that it can test the significance of all the parameters. Now I would like to say that these are the estimates. It has the ability, it has the potential to test the significance of all the estimates simultaneously. So when I will be taking the auxiliary regression, I will be coming, for example, if I will be running this one, I will be coming with R square, I call it 1. Similarly, I will call it R square 2. So when I will be getting this one, I have the formula, this, you should remember this formula. What is this formula? For Fy, you will be calculating Fy for each your regressor's auxiliary regression. So what is this? This is the R square, and this shows that how you have run the auxiliary regression. And the first is Xi, your dependent variable, and the other are independent variable. So this is divided by K minus S. K is the number of parameter, N is the total number of observation, K is the number of parameter, and this is the formula. Formula is there, you can, I think, memorize this. And what happens if the computed F value, this is now your computed F value, there will be some value of 5 point something, 4 point something. If the computed F value exceeds the critical Fi, there will be some value of F from the table. If your computed F value increases the critical F value, you will say that it means that the particular xi is collinear with other x's. For example, if I say in case of my first auxiliary regression, that is the x2, and I say that the f that we calculated here for this x2 is now greater than f tabulated. So what this means, now I can say that x2 is collinear with x3 and x4. So this was the third method to detect that whether there is multicollinearity or not. Now I would like to wind up the discussion, and I will wind up this discussion and I will give you the summary, and we will keep on discussing the problem of regression model over many of the next lecture. So this was the first problem of the regression. We started to the discussion from the R square and adjusted R square. Simply speaking, that R square is not comparable when there is number of independent variable is different in one model as compared to the other model, because as the number of regressor increases, R square automatically increase, or in other ways you can say it never decrease. So how then we can compare? There is a good method of the adjusted R square. It has the potential to make implicitly the benefit of including a new independent variable, and definitely there is a cost at you will be consuming some of the degree of freedom. So we will be taking the adjusted R square now, and this is noticeable thing that adjusted R square may be negative. Now there is a game of adjusted R square that the researcher want to maximize R square, and they are biased towards the model that are higher R square. They are right, but at the same time our objective is not to just see that there is a higher R square. Our objective is that the results are according to the theory, there are logical results, and there are the significant results. So just concentrating on the R square, rather than R square, we should also go some other criteria also. After this, we started the first problem of the the regression model, that was the multicollinearity. Multicollinearity in simplicity means that there is an exact relationship, exact linear relationship between the independent variable. So if this is the situation, then we saw that what is the nature of this, what are the consequences of this. If you remember that there are no theoretical consequences of multicollinearity. Why not? That the below property will be maintained. Your estimator, if you will estimate them by OLS, they will be again below. Then the immediate question comes that then why there is so fuss and cry about the multicollinearity. The problem is that although it has no consequences theoretical, it has some of the practical consequences. What are the practical consequences? If there is not exact but there is high multicollinearity, then your standard error will be very high. And as your standard error becomes very high, then the problem of hypothesis testing arises, because your confidence interval becomes wider and there are higher chances, more probability that you are unable to reject your null hypothesis. Indirectly, I am saying that you assume that your estimates are equal to 0 or not different from the 0. How this multicollinearity comes into the data? There are many sources. There is data collection methodology. The other source is the limited range of the independent variable. The other is that there is some natural physical constraint in the population. The other may be that if you specification bias and many others that are saying that why multicollinearity comes into the data. Then we started that how to detect this, because we can only treat this, or you can say give solution to this problem, if we know that there is multicollinearity. So we can't know this with you can say there is unique method. There are some rules of thumbs that we are studying. In the first we studied that higher R square and insignificant T ratios, and then we saw that we are testing about the pairwise correlation and when we closed our discussion, when the curtain fell, that we were talking about the auxiliary regression. I will continue my discussion from the from this lecture into the when I will start the next lecture. So goodbye and Allah Hafiz.